Welcome to Strip Coverlet, where we squeeze the bigger picture of literature. I'm Adrian Fort, and we are here for another poetry discussion. Today's poetry discussion comes to us from Dylan Thomas, one of the, I would say, colloquially best known poems, um, possibly one of the least well known poets of a famous poem. Do not go gentle into that good night. So we've got a discussion set up for this, but first we've got to get into a reading. Pardon me. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay, rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men, who caught and sang the sun in flight, and learned too late they grieved it on its way, do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death who see with blinding sight, blind eyes and blaze like meteors, and be gay, rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. First thing that I want to say, because I think it has to be said, upon reading a poem such as this, God damn, villanelles are difficult to write. Villanelles are damn near impossible to write and have make sense. And villanelles, it makes one a god to write a villanelle, have it make sense, and be good, and be transcendent, be a transcendent type of poem. Look, the explanation widely circulated for this poem is that it was written for Thomas's dying father on his deathbed. And we have that final stanza there that seems to corroborate this, and I think one of the reasons that it is probably so widely circulated is that the sort of writing and publication of this poem times out fairly well for that explanation, but I have never come across confirmation from the author that that is what this poem is. I've never come across that. Perhaps it's out there and I haven't seen it. But it's pretty easy to believe that story. It is easy to see that something so massively hard as this would have been infused with the emotions set out by losing one's parent. It seems like I'm overstating it. A villanelle, it's just how many lines and you repeat a couple of them. How hard can it be? Try it. I promise you, you'll get there. You'll write one. You'll figure it out. That doesn't mean it'll be any good. That said, that discussion, what this poem is actually written for what this poem is actually written, that discussion is not very fun. The discussion that I think is fun to have with this poem is with a poem that has so widely discussed a literal interpretation. Try to take a fresh take. Try to find a fresh take. One thing that I've often said, and I really believe, I firmly believe that when trying to find a fresh take or when trying to find the literature within something, it helps to find the big within the small, or to find the small within the big. What do I mean by that? For example, the poem everyone has read. Everyone has read, for example, I took the path less traveled by Robert Frost. I'm not going to be able to find it in here. It doesn't matter. It's way before this poem. Anyway, I took the path less traveled by is a very small idea. This particular path was less traveled. That's a small idea. This one was less traveled, so I took it. Because it is so small and finite an idea, the literature comes from the transcendent message outside of that. The literature comes from our interpretation of what is that less traveled path within our lives. So it spreads out, for example, into individuality. It spreads out into courageousness. These are the big ideas that we find from that small idea, the small idea of this one path that communicates to the reader what it communicates. Small ideas from the big. Emily Dickinson's I died for beauty. I died for beauty, but was scarce suggested in the tomb when one who died for truth was lain in an adjoining room. He questioned softly why I failed for beauty. I replied, and I for truth, the two are one, we brethren are, he said. So this poem, there's another stanza there, but that's all we really need for this sort of discussion, part of the discussion here. Truth. Beauty. I died for beauty. This is a very big idea. This is the overarching idea. What is it that you find beautiful? I died for beauty. Adrian's world. I died for poetry. Poetry is the beautiful. I died for truth. What is true? One thing that is true, people need hope to live, right? That this seems to be a truth. Poetry is hope. People need poetry to live. That's how this poem comes together, giving us the big ideas and making us rain down our small ideas. So that is how I suggest, we use literature to find big ideas from small things or small ideas from big things. If we're willing to accept that here, if we're willing to accept that with, I got it. Do not go gentle into that good night. What we are forced to do is take, I think, one of the things we can't be forced to do, it's my discussion, I'm leading it, right? All sorts of things you'd be forced to do. I think that the logical end to this part of the discussion, do not go gentle into that good night, rage against the dying of the light. That's the big idea, I think. The big idea, assuming that the normal explanation of this poem is true, that this poem is about death. And I think, pretty clearly, if we are to interpret these words as they happen on the page, we can get to the idea of death very easily. Starting from death, coming down to smaller ideas. What about dreams? What about hopes? What about those things for which we live in the mind? What about the dying of those things? What is the little death? No, I'm not going to make a poetry discussion for Do Not Go Gentle into That Good Night about the practice of edging. I'm not going to do it. You could find that on the internet surely somewhere if you wanted. But when we're talking about the little death, when we're talking about do not give in to the little death, I think that it is easy to make the leap to giving up on dreams and goals. if we are to reinterpret this as, so for me, this channel, for me, writing, for me, the idea of pursuing literature in general, that giving that up would be the little death. I refuse to do so. I refuse to say that, I refuse to go gentle into that good night. So here's one of the things that makes this poetry discussion real for me. I remember when I was an alcoholic, I used to go to the bar and get drunk. And there was a football game on. This is while I was an English major. And there was Thursday night football, Monday night football, Sunday night football, Saturday perhaps. Didn't matter. I was drunk. And something that happened on one of the plays was that a ball carrier was wrapped up. 3, 4, 5 defenders, boom, boom, boom. And he gets loose. I don't remember if it was a first down or a touchdown, whatever it was. But the announcer said, Mike Allstott did not go gentle into that good night. I'm not that old. That's not when I was in college, okay? Mike Allstott was clearly before my college days. But the ball carrier did not go gentle into that good night. He kept fighting. He raged and raged against the dying of the light. And ended up with the first down, the touchdown, whatever it was. That is what I mean. We have this big idea, do not go gentle into that good night. Do not die without putting up a fight. We do that every day. Whether that dying, whether that going easily into the good night is ripping from the day some semblance of work towards our greater goals and our dreams, whether that is for me making this video or putting 250 words, 500 words, whatever on paper towards a project, whether that is getting that first down, getting that touchdown, whether that is so struggling to find any semblance of meaning in the day at all. When we are in that state, when we are in the state where, hey, I don't want to get out of bed. Hey, I don't want to start the day. I don't want this day to go on. Do not let that happen. You have to fight. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage against the dying of the light. Those are the levels on which I think this poem is best used. I think that this big idea of death and the little death that we die every day, they are the same thing. And when we start living life in these smaller and smaller circles, I call it, it's spiraling. When you start to spiral, going with the spiral, spiraling inwards, spiraling downwards, when you think about it, that's going gentle into the good night. It might not be the best night, but if you're just going with the flow, it sure is easy. It sure is going gently. If you are spiraling inward, if you are spiraling downward, if you are spiraling into addiction, if you are spiraling out of the world, as it may be, it is because, look, assign blame if you must. Don't assign blame if you can't find it within you. But it is because the individual refuses to rage against the dying of the light. Where is it that the finger must be pointed? It's always at the individual. Because that rage, that fight, has to come from the individual. That is all I have for this poetry discussion. I hope to have you back next time for something of the same.